Okay. So to continue diving into these limiting beliefs that we have. So we're going to talk about two more of them tonight. And the first one is a really tricky one. This first one, guys get stuck. Sometimes guys get stuck in for their entire lives. And it doesn't even have to be with the people pleasing or the nice guy stuff. They can just get stuck in this limiting belief that will cause you to be stagnant and never move your life forward. It is the belief that I am who I am and I can't or shouldn't change because that is who I genuinely and authentically am. And this can often be accompanied by people should accept me for who I am. So before we dive too far into this, let me point out some key signs that you are not being authentic. So, some key signs here. You're exhausted. You feel like no matter how hard you work, you can't seem to get ahead. You're getting poor results in your life, meaning you're having poor results in your relationships. Maybe you get a lot of positive feedback at your job, but you don't make the amount of money you desire, or you don't have the job or position that you really want. If you're here right now diving into self-improvement, obviously you don't like something about yourself or you want to be able to change in some way. If you feel like you just can't win, like whether I do A or I do B, I can't win. It's a victim mentality that we can get stuck in when we have this belief. I can't win when I'm nice, and people won't like me or they'll abandon me if I'm an asshole. I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. If you are emotionally suppressing, so not able to share your genuine thoughts, feelings, and emotions with others, how can you say you're authentic if nobody knows what you really think? If you're struggling with confidence, a result of being authentically you is enjoying your life and having confidence. Because when you are authentically you, you will build a life that suits who you really are. Your career, your woman, your friends, they are all suited to fit you. But if you're feeling scared or ashamed to do certain things or lacking confidence to do what you really want or say what you really want, then you are not who you are not being who you are supposed to be. If your life is in turmoil, it is an indicator that your life isn't suited for who you really are. It's suited for this character that you've created. Do you act differently when you're alone versus when you're with friends, or when you're with your woman or women in general, or when you're with your boss, or when you're with your parents and your family? Is there a different version of you that shows up with these different people? The way you are when no one's watching should be about the same as who you are when you're in a team meeting or a family gathering. And if you don't like who you actually are, that's okay. That's part of the problem. And that's part of what we're going to work on changing, because you can become a better version of yourself so that you genuinely do like who you are and you are proud of who you are, and you no longer have to feel the need to hide who you are. If the way you are right now is hurting you, though, and not getting you the results that you desire in your romantic relationships, in your career, in your physical health, your spiritual life, then this is probably not who you are really supposed to be. It's just a version of you that you created through coping mechanisms, and it's probably driven by fear. Now, it's very easy to get trapped into not growing. Our egos and our logic can play against us with this. You can tell yourself you're being genuine because you've always been this way. That's a very logical way to think about it. This is me because this is who I've always been for as long as I can remember. So that's who I am. And since you've always been this way, it feels safe because you kind of know what to expect for the most part, and it gives you some type of order in your life. And the last thing your ego wants is to feel chaos and change. But your ego is not your amigo, my friends. You will trap yourself in the prison of the current version of you. This is why you see people doing things over and over again that are clearly harmful to their lives. They get trapped in that prison of the current version of themselves. They feel they have to keep doing these patterns and behaviors because they've always done those patterns and behaviors, and that's who they are. It's a part of the sunk cost fallacy, if you guys have ever heard of that term. So this is where, you continue watching a movie after you're 30 minutes in, even if you don't like it or aren't interested in it, because you want to avoid appearing as if you wasted time or money on it. This is why casinos make so much money, because people will continue to spend significant amounts of money on gambling, even after they lost significant amounts of money on gambling, because they believe they are due for a win. And since they invested so much money into that particular machine or that table, even though each spin or each hand is a completely separate event with the same exact odds as the past ones, you have to ask yourself, does it make sense for you to keep investing in a losing strategy only because you have already invested significant time into it and believe it will work out one day, even if there's no clear evidence of that in your life currently? Many people will feel guilt for these negative patterns and behaviors that they do that ruin their lives. That's totally normal and that's healthy. But what isn't healthy is creating a story that allows you to avoid that guilt. And this is part of what this limiting belief will do. Because if you convince yourself of a story like, well, I'm just an alcoholic, that's who I am. I'm just an addict, that's who I am. I just have ADHD, that's who I am. I'm just depressed, that's who I am. I'm just the fat guy, that's who I am. That's who I've always been. Or I'm just the nice guy, that's who I am. That's who I've always been. I can't change who I am. That wouldn't be authentic. And the most dangerous thing about labeling ourselves the good guy, the nice guy, is that it feeds our ego. And it allows us to believe that we are doing something morally right. And since it's morally right, you have to continue being this way no matter what the cost. Because the only other option is to be someone who has no morals or isn't morally correct and is an asshole, which is going to lead into our next limiting belief. If I'm not the nice guy, the only other option is to be a jerk or an asshole. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen someone say that, like in my messages, in my comments, in my videos. It's like I have to keep being that nice guy because I don't want to be the asshole. I don't want to be that guy. And that's fair. That's fair to say. But this is black or white thinking. This is, I'm either good or I'm bad. I'm winning or I'm losing. Yes or no. So the only alternative to being nice is to being an asshole. But there's another option. It's just not one or the other. And if you think you're immune to that type of thinking, let me ask you this. Have you ever thought that the girl you wanted was always choosing the asshole guy instead of you? Has that thought ever come to your head? Like, why doesn't she want me? Why does she always choose these assholes? Or maybe the girl you were with at one point chose to go back to an asshole ex-boyfriend, or chose to date the asshole after she left you. Or have you ever thought that a specific guy that made more money than you or had a better job or position than you only got that because he was an asshole or maybe did something bad to get it? We need to redefine our definition of an asshole or a bad guy. Think about all the most successful men in our generation. Okay. Think about athletes like Tom Brady and Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, businessmen like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, some of the most influential people and men of our time. Would you guys agree that most people in society would not look at those men and say that they're nice guys? Everyone agree? Nod your head if you agree. Okay, we're all in agreement. In fact, a lot of people really don't like those men. And they would even go as far as to call them assholes and say things like, I don't really like the things that that guy says. I don't really like how he's always talking about God, or he's always talking about politics, or whatever subject that that guy voices his particular beliefs on. I don't like how he treats his employees. I don't like how he talks to his teammates or his coaches. But every single man in this room would love to have the type of success that those men have achieved. So let's look at some of the other men on the opposite side of the spectrum. Just think about someone in your life that you would consider the nicest guy you've ever met. Maybe that's you even. If someone has ever said that about you, what are the results that that person has gotten in their life, in their career, in their marriage, in their relationships? And what we have to realize is that those guys who are considered assholes and bad guys are getting the results that we want for a reason. So, what is that reason? The one thing that you can say about those athletes and businessmen that I mentioned earlier is that they are authentically themselves no matter who they offend, right? They want to win in their particular thing, and they're going to do and say whatever they think and want to do to make that happen. And they're not worried about who they offend in the process. They have developed traits that some of us may have built shame around. Key in on this. This is important. This was a big one for me personally. And I didn't even realize it until I started like really diving in. So I myself saw some of these traits that those guys had subconsciously as traits that bad guys or assholes have. So, like assertiveness, being very direct, being brutally honest sometimes, leadership positions, holding people accountable, boldness, confidence. I subconsciously viewed those as bad things because My experiences as a young man caused me to believe that, deeply rooted in me. Because when I was younger, I was the fat kid, and everyone that bullied me displayed those particular traits or some of those traits. My mom was an extreme feminist, constantly pointing out men in leadership positions that she would call assholes. That president is such an asshole. That superintendent, don't be like that guy. That guy's an asshole. That whoever, men in power in leadership positions, my coaches, sometimes those guys were assholes. The girls that would friend zone me would always vent to me about the guys they were dating and how they were all assholes. The things that they would do that made them assholes. And oftentimes those guys had some of the traits that I mentioned, right? When I looked at them, they had those traits. So subconsciously, I just put it into my head that those traits were bad things and I should not be those things or develop those things. I didn't even consciously choose that. It was just like in my head, deeply rooted in me not to be like that because all of the people and experiences in my life told me that those were bad people. And maybe if you look far enough back, you can see some commonalities in that. Now, a lot of nice guys at some point will end up deciding to turn to the quote unquote dark side and maybe take a crack at being a bad guy or an asshole because they're tired of the results that they have been getting in life and they want to get the girls or make the money or get the promotion or whatever. I myself experienced this. I went from the nice guy, the virgin who never drank, never smoked, never partied, always in the friend zone with girls that he liked, had no confidence, constantly getting walked over and talked over and disrespected by my family and friends, to the exact opposite. Because when I went away to college, at some point I realized nobody knew who I was. And I could get to be someone completely different than who I used to be. So I became the drug dealer, the party guy, the womanizer, the bully, and the guy that said whatever he wanted and didn't really care what people thought of him. And what I realized when I went through that process was I actually started getting a lot of the results that I desired, especially when it came to women. But I felt way worse about who I was than before because I was constantly hurting other people. And this was like the beginning of me figuring out what it was that I was missing when I was the nice guy and what it is about being an asshole that works and what it is about being an asshole that I don't agree with and I don't want to apply. There is this fine line that we must walk between being the nice guy and becoming an asshole. It is a mesh of the best parts of each side. And what I tell a lot of guys is that oftentimes what you'll find is that in order to find that line, you're going to have to cross it, right? In order to find that line, you're going to have to get to it. And typically you're going to overstep it and have to walk ourselves back. We need to find what is it about being a nice guy that's good and beautiful. You have big hearts, you care, you have empathy for people, right? You genuinely desire the best for everyone and you don't want to hurt people. That's beautiful. That's good, right? So what is it about the assholes that we can take and keep those good things? So part of this experience for me, I did an experiment. Okay. I did an experiment where I just started being very direct with people. And one of the big problems with people pleasing and nice guys, especially in marriages, is you'll typically end up in like a sexless marriage. I found myself there, and maybe some of you guys can attest to this, like that can happen. That's part of it. It's very unfortunate. And part of the reason why is because we are afraid to ask for what we want because of how they will respond. And something I realized as I was conducting this experiment with girls at the time, a girl would ask, like, I would ask a girl if she wanted to hang out with me, if she wanted to go on a date or hang out or something, right? And they would typically respond with yes or no. And if they responded yes, they would ask me what I wanted to do. And when they did that, I would respond right away with something like, well, we could, practice making babies, or, I'd like to get naked and explore every inch of your body, or whatever. I would just directly tell her that I was sexually interested in her. It was the exact opposite of what I had done my whole life. And I'm not even kidding you, this worked almost every time. Like 99% of the, and I only say 99% because I'm not even sure it never, I can't remember a time when it didn't work. Probably because I just forgot about the rejections and moved on. But it was scary how often this worked. And it's something that we have to implement into our romantic relationships. We cannot hide. We cannot hide that. We have to constantly pursue her. If you do not pursue, it's done. The moment that you give up because of her rejections or whatever, the moment that you say, you know what, I'm done getting rejected, I'm done trying, I'm just going to stop and wait to see how long it takes for her to initiate. Who's played that game before? The worst decision you can ever make. She will never initiate, maybe never again. And then by you doing that, what we don't realize is because we stop initiating, they start thinking we're not even attracted to them anymore, which is far from the truth. But we get so frustrated because of the rejection that we give up. You must persevere. Okay, this is kind of like outside of what we're talking about, and I'm going off on a tangent, but it is so freaking important. I'm telling you guys, I fell into that trap early on into my relationship, and I was lucky to turn it around. Never stop pursuing. So, coming back into that, one of the biggest mistakes we make is we hide our intentions. We dance around what we want. We form covert contracts and do whatever we can to avoid any possible conflict or rejection because we see conflict and rejection as I'm bad. And this was the beginning of my understanding that being direct and not hiding my thoughts, feelings, and emotion would actually lead to me getting what I wanted most of the time. As I experimented more and more with this idea, I realized that I didn't have to be either a nice guy or an asshole. I started meeting successful people who I just assumed were assholes and probably bad people. But the more I got to know them, the more I realized that they were like much healthier than I was. And they had just developed these traits that I had built up some type of shame around and had been avoiding my whole life, like assertiveness, honesty, leadership, boldness. I used to look at those traits as like mean and nasty things that would lead to me getting into trouble or hurting people's feelings or offending people. I realized that these guys who I always thought were probably just bad people or assholes were actually acting with integrity, and the people that were reacting poorly to them oftentimes did it out of their own insecurities that they had. It wasn't because these people were bad people. It was because the other people that were triggered or offended by them were just insecure and they couldn't control themselves, right? A big part of what we're talking about and doing here through these programs is learning how to control ourselves, learning to understand what are our triggers, and how can we better handle them with strength. And listen, I'm not saying there aren't some really mean and nasty people out there that are using those traits to hurt others and, might even be psychopaths, because those people definitely exist. But those people make a very small percentage of the population. They're rare. Those people definitely exist, but I think what you'll find is most people aren't actually like that. So you don't have to be one or the other. There is another option. What does that option look like? You can be assertive and stand up for yourself while having compassion for others and making sure that you are not badly harming others for your own gain. You can be bold and honest in going for what you want and saying what you are thinking, but you can also have empathy and understanding when people don't like what you say or do. You can understand why someone is upset simultaneously while you don't agree with them. I get it. Um, man, I feel terrible that you feel that way, but I don't really agree with what you're saying here. But I don't want you to feel that way. Is there something you need? How can I help you? You can be direct with people instead of dancing around the subject, while also understanding that if they reject you, it's okay. If they don't agree with you, that is okay. It's actually good. You can open up and be honest and vulnerable with others, not out of need for validation or not out of oversharing, but because you aren't afraid of losing them anymore. You are no longer needy. You can be a responsible leader that takes initiative and goes after what he wants in life while also listening to the thoughts and ideas of others and knowing when to be led because their way may actually be better than yours sometimes, instead of always allowing everyone else to lead and get their way because it's easier. There's no there's no resistance if you do that. There's no fear of rejection or abandonment as long as you let everyone else make the decisions. You can confront and comfort. But if you continue to be dishonest and hide your genuine thoughts and feelings in order to help others by not upsetting them, all you are really doing is hurting yourself because you're afraid of how people will react to your authentic thoughts and feelings and decisions. You are stopping yourself from becoming the best version of you and living a life that you would actually enjoy and getting all of the things that you really desire. A life that is truly suited to who you actually are, not this character that you've built. You can be a person that honestly speaks his mind to the benefit of everyone around him, because being honest is going to benefit everyone. If you were honest about how you felt about some of the decisions your wife was making for your family and your relationship, maybe you wouldn't get in a situation that you were in. If you were honest about your genuine thoughts and feelings and emotions with the people that are around you, they could understand you on a deeper level and better know how to properly love you and serve you. So you don't have to be in this endless cycle of one-sided relationships where you're focused on loving and serving them, but they don't even know who you are because they don't know your genuine thoughts, feelings, and desires because you have felt some type of shame around them and you don't want to share them. So that's it for this one. I want to hear from you guys. I want to know your biggest takeaways on this. Okay, so go ahead, Cal.
The well, I'm sort of the same situation as you were. I have a mix of both, but I did it wrongly because